Welcome to the American Maritime Podcast. We're glad to have you aboard. I'm your host, Jennifer Carpenter, Vice President of the American Maritime Partnership and Chair of the AMP Offshore Wind Committee. Today, we are very pleased to have as our guest Ed Washburn. Ed is Senior Vice President of Fleet Operations for Pasha Hawaii, which is part of the Pasha Group, a family-owned global logistics and transportation company. Welcome, Ed, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So let's start with an introduction to you and to Pasha Hawaii. When you meet someone who's not in the maritime or the logistics business, how do you describe your work and what Pasha does?
Yeah, well, the simple answer is we move stuff, and the more difficult, the better. But the real answer is we're a family-run, family-owned and operated company that really instills family values, which is probably the highlight of Pasha Hawaii. We do operate 6 vessels currently. We have 3 container ships, a ConRo and a RoRo serving the West Coast U.S. mainland to Hawaii. And we also have a container ship in reserve. My role is I manage vessel operations, labor, fuel, crewing, environmental health, regulatory, new construction, ESG, recruiting, and pretty much everything to do with the vessels, Jennifer.
That is a lot. I probably should have asked what your role doesn't entail. So tell us a little bit, how does the work that Pasha does affect and improve the life of an average person living in Hawaii?
Right. Well, Hawaii is very unique as an island state, and 98% of the goods imported to Hawaii come by ocean shipping. We play a big part in that. And the intriguing part is the reliability of the goods that flow to Hawaii. There was a lot in the last couple of years where we saw supply chain disruptions, immense price hikes. And in this particular case, especially in the last 2 years, our schedule reliability and integrity has been the best it's ever been. The goods are on the shelf as planned. There's no price hikes. They're all stable. If we get a 3% GIR, we're very happy. And the investment that we've made in Hawaii keeps us in Hawaii delivering goods, and there's no opportunistic reasons to leave Hawaii and to go to the Pacific trade. So what makes the person's life better is we offer a very, very reliable service that's dedicated to the communities we serve, and we don't take opportunistic trade routes and abandon Hawaii.
That is great stuff. And I'm sure something that just so much more resonates with folks now after our experience of the last couple of years. We know what empty shelves look like now.
Yes, that's right. And unique to Hawaii, Jennifer, is because the island is geographic with mountainous and there's not a lot of land, so there's not a lot of warehouses. So the consumer and the retailers rely on just-in-time service. So the goods really come from the ship right to the store. And because of that, we need reliable, on time and really a fast service. So there is no depots. If the ship is late, the stores lack those goods. So it's very important that the goods arrive on time and a reliable schedule.
Absolutely. So, Ed, you've been working in maritime for 30 years. In that time, I have too, so I'm not saying you're old, okay? But in that time, we've seen a lot of changes in this industry. And I think sustainability is one of those areas that has been just particularly dynamic. Can you talk a little bit about how the industry's approach to sustainability has evolved over the years?
Sure. 30 years seems like an awful long time. I haven't seen coal propulsion, but certainly oil and steam propelled ships. When I started, actually, My father's been in the industry for over 60 years. So as a toddler, I've been on the vessels basically my whole life and made a career out of it. But really getting out of extremely heavy fuel oil with no sulfur restrictions to a restricted sulfur lighter oil has made a big difference. And now we see going to LNG. And actually, I'll step back. So in the beginning of my career, almost all the Jones Act ships were steam propulsion using heavy fuel. So if I look over 30 years, I do see a steam to diesel transition. And then now we see really a diesel to alternative fuel transition, and LNG being one of the important ones. We've seen scrubbers come along, and they've improved particulate matter and sulfur. We've seen hydrogen coming, which is very, very exciting. There is some really cool, clean fuels that are coming, still in the infancy stage. But I think at this point, the push for sustainability is probably better than it's ever been. And I believe that the technology will develop faster than ever for cleaner technologies and cleaner fuels and less emissions.
It's really, really an exciting and dynamic field. Why is sustainability such a priority for Pasha, Ed?
Yeah, Jennifer. So, well, geographically, our headquarters are in Marin, California, and Honolulu, Hawaii. So that's really, there's a sense of pride in those two communities that of protecting the natural resource. It's been in the culture in both communities for a really long time. And then inherently, it's a Pasha culture. We do a lot for sustainability. We think the investment is worth it. I've been an LNG advocate since the early 2000s. I think it's a great stepping fuel. And we have seen just great stuff in hull coatings, energy saving devices, and we've invested in all that. And then we do see the difference, and we're proud of it, and we think it's the right thing to do. And the communities we serve also think the same way, and we're happy to be able to invest in those technologies to help the communities.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you're really putting your money where your mouth is with some of these investments.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, it's a lot of money, Jennifer, but we think the investment's worth it.
It's fantastic. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about people. I mean, people are really the engine that makes this industry go, and recruiting and retaining and developing the maritime industry, the maritime workforce of the future is just critical, not only to keeping vessels moving now, but to really making sure that we have what we need to power this industry in the future. And I know that Pasha Hawaii has been really a leader in the military to maritime program that connects U.S. military veterans with the maritime industry. Can you talk a little bit about that program and what it's done, why it's been important for Pasha Hawaii?
Sure. We have quite a few veterans that have working for us that have come from military to maritime. And our actions in that is really going to was outreach and going to veteran centers and trying to assist also veterans on the seafarer side with accrediting their sea time with the Navy, for instance, and fast tracking licensing or through the unlicensed unions. We're working with the unions, and there's always recruiting issues for the U.S. Merchant Marine, and the military is just a fantastic way to make that transfer. And we find military personnel really fit in well with the hierarchical type of atmosphere on a vessel, and so we promote it and we like it, and everyone that we've got, every veteran's been a fantastic part of the team.
Oh, that's terrific. That's a real win-win. So, one key to making sure that we have the maritime workforce we need for the future is really making sure that people from all walks of life, women, minorities, people from communities all across the country, A, know about our industry, and B, know about the opportunities that are available to them here and feel like they have a place. Can you tell us a little bit about what Pasha is doing to attract and retain diverse talent and how that's working for your company?
Oh, sure. So, well, one of the first things I think that's most prominent for me is I'm on the board of directors for Cal Maritime Foundation, and that issue is brought up at every meeting. And we attend the school fairs, and we promote diversity while we're there. We do diversity outreach in Oakland and in LA when they have diversity fairs. We work with the unions. I'm a trustee on engineers and the mates union, and that is a high priority subject. And we participate and do everything we can to promote diversity. And maybe one of the biggest differentiator is, I think, on board our vessels. We have a very diverse group. We certainly promote diversity, and I think there's a comfort level where diversity kind of comes to us because of that nice feeling on board of acceptance.
Oh, that's terrific. So people really kind of see themselves reflected in your vessel workforce and know that they're going to have a home there.
Yes, we've have had just great reports from people on board, and especially cadets, and which is a great place to start diversity. We were one of the first companies to enroll and embark and be approved. We're proud of that, and we think the culture on board is good. I think once we get to about 20% of women and minority, we won't even be thinking about it anymore, but we're working to get there.
That's great. It would not be the American Maritime Podcast if we didn't talk about the Jones Act. So we're going to do that now. From your perspective, Ed, why is the Jones Act important to American security, especially in the Pacific?
Yeah, so in the Pacific, really the security there is the security of the flow of goods, as we discussed with Hawaii. In Hawaii, there's 7 major Navy command stations that need to be supplied. Of course, in the inland waterways, we need to maintain the American seafarer, so we keep bad actors out. And we do transport quite a bit of military goods on our ro-ro vessels. And it's so important for the security. And as I had stated, over this time of pandemic and supply chain crisis, just the seafarers, the American seafarers, stood out like no other. And we continue to serve the state of Hawaii, as well as the other Jones Act carriers continue to serve Puerto Rico and Alaska, all the non-contiguous, and weren't opportunistic. Kept stable pricing, kept the flow of goods going. And really, that would not have happened if it was an international fleet running there. Our fleet and all the Jones Act fleet, I know from my sea land days with Puerto Rico and Alaska, the ships and the assets are particular to those states and possessions. And there's a tremendous amount of investment that keeps the flow of goods going. It really makes it an effort with investment that the goods are not interrupted, and they're not overpriced, and they're stable, and everyone has milk on the shelves when they need it.
Yeah, here. I mean, for all of the challenges that we've endured as a country over the last couple of years, it's pretty scary to think how much worse things could have been had we not had the Jones Act. Fortunately, we didn't have to find out.
That's right, and unique, and most Jones Act carriers operate the same way, but we really own the supply chain from door to door. So we own our own containers. We have our own chassis fleet. We own our own trucks. We employ our own truck drivers. We have U.S. built, U.S. crewed ships. So we have berthing availability. We have labor preference. So certainly when ships were waiting 7 and 8 weeks off of LA, we basically skipped the line to keep the goods going to the American people.
That is so well said. And I think something that a lot of Americans just don't realize that really domestic control of our supply chain gives us this degree of economic security that we just wouldn't have if we were dependent on foreign carriers.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Good stuff. So from time to time, Jones Act critics pop up in Hawaii. What would you say to them? What are they missing?
Well, of course, they're missing the reliability. They're missing the job creation. We have over 400 employees in Hawaii. They are missing the security, and they're really missing the dedication, the American seafarers who really were heroes. And all through the pandemic, our seafarers, they give up a lot every day in normal times, and they really sacrificed and lived some difficult situations during the pandemic, but operated flawlessly the whole time. Never were without crew, never missed a sailing, and our on-time reliability rated within 10-minute intervals was over 96%. So we're really proud of that, and it's hard for a critic to counter that.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about essential workers. You pretty much just defined it right there.
That's right.
So, Ed, before we close out this episode of American Maritime Podcast, is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to raise, or anything you want to dig a little bit deeper on, put a finer point on? Please go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I guess I'm excited. I'm honored to really be at Pasha and do all the cool stuff we're doing. We're developing our LNG bunkering infrastructure in LA, which is a big part of my job. We are electrifying our terminals. We'll have a Wilmington terminal in Wilmington, California, which will be able to run 2 8-hour shifts without the electric grid. And we have battery storage and solar and wind and crane regeneration going there. That's really cool. We do have a proposal in for a new terminal in Hawaii to basically do the same thing, be able to operate without the grid, using solar, wind, and a natural gas generator and battery storage. We're working with MARAD and the PIDP on that. But I just emphasize it's an exciting time, exciting with the sustainability, with our new LNG powered ships coming. It couldn't be in a better place. Thank you.
Oh, that is fantastic. Congratulations on that great work, and good luck to you. I look forward to hearing more about it. Ed, thank you for sharing your insights with us today. It has been great having you on the podcast. We're going to wrap up here. I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in and encourage you to share the podcast with friends and colleagues who would benefit from learning more about the great story that American Maritime has to tell. That's all for today. I'm your host, Jennifer Carpenter, signing off.